Good day, everybody. I hope that you are well and also hope that you are having a good day so far. Today, we'll be doing our grade 5 English lesson on relative pronouns. And before we start, we're going to log on to aplusstudents.ca. Once we've logged on to aplusstudents.ca with our username as well as our password, and then we're going to select the subject of English language arts, grade 5. And then we're going to scroll down up until we get to our chapter of relative pronouns. All right. So this is a continuation of our previous lesson, which is also relative pronouns. So today we're going to finish off the rest of the lessons. All right. So when it comes to relative pronouns, right? Then we are going to use relative pronouns, right? And the relative pronouns are words like who, whom, whose, which, and that. Those are our relative pronouns. And remember, we said that a pronoun takes the place of a noun. All right, so we're going to find out more about relative pronouns. Firstly, our chapter relative pronouns. Our subject is English language arts. Grade 5. All right. So when it comes to relative pronouns, a relative pronoun, it introduces a dependent, or another word is it introduces a relative clause that describes a noun or a pronoun. All right, so a relative pronoun we said introduces a dependent or even a relative clause that describes a noun or that describes a pronoun. All right. And once again, we said that a relative pronoun, it introduces a dependent clause. Another word for dependent clause is a relative clause that describes a noun or describes a pronoun. All right. All right. Our main, or let's say our five main relative pronouns, right? Our five main relative pronouns are the words who, whom, whose, which, and that. So that is our main relative pronouns. All right. And when it comes to relative pronouns, right, that introduces either a dependent or relative clause and it describes a noun or a pronoun, right? The relative pronouns who and whom, if we look at the relative pronouns who and whom, all right. So if we use the words who and whom, right? And we use who or whom and it gives us information about people, right? And to figure out whether to use who or whom or how to use who or whom. So now we're going to figure out what does who mean, what does who mean, what does whom mean, right? So we said some of our pronouns, relative pronouns, right? Who and whom, they give information about people. All right. And when we try to figure out how and when to use who and when to use whom, right? We just have to restate the dependent clause with a personal pronoun. So we restate the independent clause with a pronoun number or letter. All right. So when it comes to, the pronoun who and whom, in order for us to figure out whether to use who or whom, we need to restate the dependent clause with a personal clause or personal noun. All right. So it says that in order for us to figure out whether to use who or whether to use whom, we need to restate the dependent clause with a personal pronoun. All right. So when it comes to relative pronouns, right, we see that we have five main relative pronouns, which is who, whom, whose, which, and theirs. So that is our five main relative pronouns. So we see that in order for us to give information or to know how to use firstly who and whom, or how to use the relative pronouns, and then we're gonna have to restate the dependent clause with a personal pronoun. You're gonna have to restate, right? So which means that if the clause uses a subject pronoun, right? Let's say the subject of the sentence is a pronoun and it either starts with he, she, or they, then we use the word who. So if the clause uses a subject pronoun, right, and a subject pronoun uses words like he, she, or they, and then we use the relative pronoun who. And if the clause uses an object pronoun such as him, her, or them, then we use the word whom. And if we look at an example, right, or examples, and then we can say the woman who lives next door grows tomatoes in her garden. So the woman, we can even say she, right? But the woman who lives next door grows tomatoes in her garden. So there we have the word who within that sentence. And the subject is the woman. The next one says the woman who lives next door grows tomatoes in a garden, which means that she lives next door, right? And then lastly, we say Peter, whom you met yesterday, has four younger brothers. So when it comes to relative pronouns, right, we see that the relative pronoun introduces a dependent or relative clause that describes a noun or a pronoun, and the pronoun takes the place of a noun, right? It is words like he, she, they. All right. And we use who when we make mention of a subject clause, he, she, or they, and whom as an object pronoun, him, her, or them. All right, so now we're going to continue. All right, so we say that we know how to, for example, choose between who and whom. Now, on to the next one with a relative pronoun. It gives necessary information about things. Necessary information narrows down what you are talking about and is not set off by any commas. All right. So we say that a relative pronoun it gives information and it gives information about things, right? right. The last one says, do not confuse whose and who. So you shouldn't compare whose and who. So we should not confuse words with whose. For example, who is a contraction for who or who else. So it doesn't show position. All right, it says do not confuse those. So do not confuse whose with those. And whose is a contraction for who is and who has, and it doesn't mean position, right? All right. So now we're going on to aplusstudents.ca, and we are going to our test. All right, so we went over in our previous lesson, we went over to identify relative pronouns, and we use relative pronouns who and what and whom. Now we're in the last lesson, which is to use relative pronouns such as who, whom, whose, which, and that. All right, and we gave a description on how to use the relative pronouns. So now let's go to our test. We need to complete the sentence with best relative pronoun. All right, so we need to choose either between which or that. It says the certificate. All right, so here we have to here we're completing our sentence with the base relative pronoun, and we need to say that it says the certificate. Do we say the certificate that I received or the certificate which I received for perfect attendance had my name spelled incorrectly? So the certificate, do we say that I received for perfect attendance had my name spelled incorrectly, or do we say the certificate which I received for perfect attendance had my name spelled incorrectly? All right, so the certificate, do we say? Let's go with option one that everybody says the certificate that I received for perfect attendance had my name spelled incorrectly. And that is correct, right? So instead of using any other relative pronoun, that is correct. So dynamite is a dangerous compound. All right, so it says dynamite is a dangerous compound and it can cause enormous explosion. All right, so we say dynamite is a dangerous compound. Do we say that can cause enormous explosions, or do we say which can cause enormous explosion? All right, so we need to say that we need to choose between that and we need to choose between which in order to answer the question that says, does, not does, dynamite is a dangerous compound. So now we must say if it's true or false, like is it so or no. And dynamite is a small dangerous compound and can cause enormous explosions. All right, so we say dynamite is a dangerous compound that can cause enormous explosion. So that is correct. So well done. The garment factory. Do we say the garment factory? Do we say which opens next month? Will primarily focus. All right, so we say the garment. Do we say which opens next month, the garment factory, or do we say the garment factory that opens next month will primarily focus baseball caps? All right, so if we were to choose the correct one, right? So if we choose the correct one, then we can say the garment factory. All right, everybody says, some people say which, some people say that. Some people say which opens next month. Some says that open next month. Let's choose one so long and then we can debate around that, right? So it says, so it is which, right? And the reason why we used which, so here it is which, not that, right? So well done. Which, the ones who chose which, well done. So it is which, the garment factory, which, and not that. All right, the leather sandals. Do we say the leather sandals which I purchased last week are still on sale? Or do we say the leather sandals that I purchased last week are still on sale? So the leather sandals that I purchased last week, it is still on sale. So well done. That is correct. So that is correct. That was the second option. Now we're going to the next one. It says the musical. So the musical, do we say the musical which Mr. Russell directed was actually quite successful? Or do we say the musical that Mr. Russell directed was actually quite successful? So we say the musical. Do we say which Mr. Russell directed was actually quite successful? Or do we say that Mr. Russell directed was actually quite successful? So that is our correct answer, right? So that is our correct answer. So well done. Option two is correct or was correct. Well done. The next one says Campbell held a parade on Sunday for soldiers. Do we say who had served in the Navy, or do we say whom had served in the Navy? So Campbell held a parade on Sunday for soldiers. Do we say who had served in the Navy, or do we say whom had served in the Navy? We need to choose option one or option two. All right. And then we get the next one says Campbell held a parade on Sunday for soldiers. Do we say who had served in the Navy? Or do we say whom had served in the Navy? And if we choose the option, so we need to say, is it who served in the Navy? Or do we say whom served in the Navy? Option one or option two, who or whom? All right, so we say Campbell held a parade on Sunday for soldiers who had served in the Navy. So well done. So who had served in the Navy? Sometimes it can be very tricky, right? When we try to identify our relative pronouns, right? When we try to identify either who, whom, whose, which, and that. So these are things that you're just going to have to remember, right? All right, the next one says Yoshi avoids any restaurant which is overrun with tourists. That is overrun with tourists. So Yoshi avoids any restaurants. Let's use the word which is it's actually that is overrun with tourists. So we don't say which is overrun with tourists, but we say that is overrun with tourists. So that was our correct answer. So I apologize over there. That is actually our answer. That was the correct answer. So option two was the correct answer. I chose the wrong one. So I apologize. That is why I said it can be very tricky, like using let's say our relative pronouns, right? Because the thing is you're gonna have to know your relative pronouns in order to, for example, identify it within our sentence. All right, so it says Martin Luther King Jr. Martin Luther King Jr. Do we say whom fought for civil rights was an admired minister, or do we say who fought for civil rights was an admired minister? If we look at the words like who and whom, right? Who refers to people, right? It refers to people, it refers to the subject, right? Whom refers to people, but in the object form, right? Whose refers to things, that possessive things, right? That is mine. Which refers to either an animal or a thing. And that refers to people, things, and animals. All right, and if we choose our correct answer, then we can say Martin Luther King, who fought for civil rights. Well done. So who? And let's do the last one. This is the last one. It says, did the girl, do we say, did the girl whom you met at summer camp ever write you? Or do we say, did the girl who you met at summer camp ever write to you? We need to choose either who or whom. All right, so if we look at did the girl, let's try option two. It's actually whom. The reason why it's whom, right? Because it is an object pronoun, right? So instead of us, let's say for example, I had to say something, right? And it refers to me, then it would have been who. But since we are making mention of another person, right? Because I say, did the girl you met, right? We are making mention of another person. That is whom, right? Because now it becomes a, it's almost like it's an object, right? It's an object, the object of the verb. So which means that our answer was supposed to be option one. But well done, guys. Whom was our correct answer. All right, so this is now the end of our lesson on relative pronouns. Thank you very much, grade 5, the lesson. Thank you for interacting. We spoke about relative pronouns, and we see that relative pronouns, right, they have the main pronouns such as who, whom, whose, which, and that. Who refers to people, which is the subject. Whom refers to people, which is the object of the verb. Whose refers to it being a possession. Which refers to animals and objects, and that refers to people, things, and animals. So that is the end of our lesson. Thank you very much, grade 5. You should have a good evening further. So till next time, goodbye.